Awesemo fantasy basketball fans. Happy fake Thanksgiving to everybody out there. If you're anything like me and my friends, this Sunday is when you get together and have some drinks, have a little bit of a party. After a decade and change of doing this, there's kids running all over the place over here. That's why I've got a strange backdrop this weekend, but I'm here. We're going to go through the fantasy basketball slate. Fortunately, I've got Gunn. Gunn's been paying attention to everything going on throughout the day. He's got all the updates in hand. We've got a few pieces of breaking news that we're going to go through. Going to talk through the slate. Going to go through a little fantasy basketball. Gunn, how you doing? How's your Sunday been going, bud?
Good. I thought you sold all your DVDs, bro. I got scared. It's like, wait a minute.
This is surprisingly, there's a really large room that's been hiding behind those DVDs all this time. You know, who knew? Yeah, that would be a minor tragedy on if those DVDs got shipped out. Not from any kind of entertainment kind of standpoint or financial standpoint, but like a little bit of attachment there at this point. So busy Sunday, a lot of stuff going on. We had a busy, weird kind of NFL slate, and I feel like we've got a little bit of a weird basketball slate that we're dealing with. We've got a few guys going out. We just found out that OG Anunoby is most likely not going to play, so we're taking him off the board in the most recent update to our tools. So I'm just getting that dropped in here. But Gunn, any kind of overview, anything you want to go through to kick us off here from the top?
Yeah, quick little 4-gamer. There is a 2-hour gap, it looks like, between game number 1 and the last 3. So if you're managing lineups like we do, really just iron out your core from the first game, and then you can pay more attention later. That's probably how I would approach it. But the first game seems to be like my favorite game. So you got to be really, really strong with your percentages if you are going to take that approach.
Yeah, it's a frustrating breakdown when it comes that way, where it's most of the, really solid plays are in that early game, and then you can get to a lot of different spots late, but maybe you've already locked too many plays. It's a really, it's a tightrope to walk with some of the lineup constructions. Are there any specific guys that you've got in mind that you're like carving out space for in the later games where you're really targeting, all right, I want to leave a specific amount of room to get to increase shares of that guy over the top of the public, to just kind of start out from an interesting conversation about this slate?
Yeah, I always got to make room for the MVP, Nikola Jokic, especially on a shorter slate, man. I'll weigh raw points even more than the normal slate. And, maybe it's a tough perceptual matchup, but we've watched Jokic drop 60, 70 in tough matchups. I think about the Adebayo matchup. So probably Jokic is a guy I definitely want to hang my hat on. And the fun thing about the later games is that they all tip within 30 minutes, but it's just a 2-hour wait time between first tip and second tip.
Yeah, we get that oddball early game and then a long wait, but it's going to be a fun sprint through those final games. So it's get everything lined up before that first of the next batch lock, I think, is really the approach there, and kind of rock it through. So talking about some of those plays, looking at Jokic, any concern at all with Jokic about the injury? I know he missed the last game, a little bit of a lingering wrist issue. They weren't really putting time frames on anything. Any lingering concerns about some lasting impact of the wrist, or just kind of full on fire away with him if he's assuming he's on the court?
Yeah, I definitely need to have it's probably going to come down to like a 2v2 plan. The last slate he was on, my fail safe was Giannis center only in my cruncher, and then if Jokic got scratched, I would full send it to Giannis, and that worked out because Giannis dropped a big game. Don't have that here, so I think a fail safe with him would be finding a 2v2. It probably will come down to maybe putting him in the util and just using that money to maybe get to like Steph Curry or something like that in the late game for a $200 difference. And they don't really feel bad about having Steph at the house in that home coming back after that road trip.
Yeah, never bad to get to Steph Curry as your pivot option, as your backup there. Another guy who's, there's a couple guys that stand out, but a guy that maybe you could pivot into in a situation like that in the same game. Chris Paul coming in $8,900 salary on FanDuel, $8,300 on DK. It's dramatically different than the 11,000 and change that you're getting Jokic at, but at least it's a pay up guy. And then maybe you pivot from another spot, like you said, as a 2v2 into a mid-range guy there. So why don't we take it a little bit? We'll go through some questions. We'll take a look at a lot of stuff. Brought to you by Yahoo today, by the way, guys. Make sure you check out Yahoo. We'll get into a little bit about a promo coming up with those guys. Give us a like, give us a subscribe. Make sure to hit all of our different shows. We've got DFS offers. We've got giveaways. That's how you keep up with everything, right? We've got different things available on the site today for free, although probably most of those have gone by. NBA player projections and NHL top stacks would be the relevant ones right now. So if you're looking to play some NBA tonight, projections, pretty key part of what you were doing here, are free on the site. We'll get into a little bit of a special that we've got going on a little bit later in the show. But again, why don't we jump in, take a look at a little bit of position by position. And why don't we take a look at some of the guards on the slate? It's a little bit different site to site with some of the positioning, some of the salary. Who are you seeing as like the primary guards that you're focused on just overall across the different sites, wherever it may land?
So one of the pieces of news today, Killian Hayes is out, Cade Cunningham 7,100. And, for the last 2 weeks, I've been saying, hey, at the All-Star break, is Cade Cunningham going to be 8,500 and we regret not playing him at 6K? Well, you're watching the progression happen. A couple of games of really strong fantasy points, 40-plus fantasy points in 3 games straight. And the Lakers have just bled fantasy points to opposing everything. They play at a really, really high pace here. And you got to believe Cade Cunningham is looking forward to his first pro game against the 3 names on the other side of the court. So 7,100, I'm going to be on Cade Cunningham pretty strong. So he was like the first name that sticks out. And he's definitely one of the biggest exposures I'm going to have to that. First game, it looks like we got him about 25%. So 1 in 4 of every lineup will feature Cade Cunningham. And then, like I said, everyone is in play against the Lakers. Sadiq Bey, if you got him for over 30 minutes, which we do, Jeremy Grant, both guys that will probably feature a really good price point, almost stackable, where you could see Cunningham, Bey, Grant coexist to an extent on a 4-game slate to all kind of satisfy what you would want from them from a fantasy perspective, 30 to 40 plus fantasy points. So those are nice compliments to Kane. I'm sorry, I'm not used to doing position by position. I'm trying to stick with the guard here, but Cade Cunningham is the one that stands out the most. And then I don't mind running it back on the other side with Russell Westbrook.
Yeah, and look, I'm with you. We'll go through a question and take it wherever you want to go. Don't worry about the positions because all of that's relevant, right? The different plays from their own team, the different plays that also have upside for salary. A lot of these guys have some crossover positioning, so it's all relevant. It's definitely worth bringing up, and particularly when you look at some of those guys on DK where those prices fall in. Yeah, I think a lot of those guys are going to be, at least if you're building 150 lineups, pieces that you're going to want to have to around the field. And you're getting positive leverage on most of those guys. And where you get negative leverage on a guy like Cade Cunningham with his general upside that we expect from that play. Maybe he hasn't really shown it to us yet. 0.96 fantasy points per minute, 46.8% true shooting percentage for him so far. I think we both agree that he's going to be a better player than that. So I'm not really going to sweat negative 3.1 leverage on that play on DK. You get a little bit more concerned maybe at negative 6.8 on FanDuel, but I think he comes up optimal enough. You get him at both guard spots that it makes sense to just stick him in there and kind of focus on getting different at some other positions. Are there any guys for you that stick out as extreme value options at the guard spot on either side?
He's never fun to play, but if you if you pluck out Killian Hayes, you might get some minutes from very cheap Corey Joseph. 30 minutes his last 2 games, 29-20. Like I said, you up the pace here against the Lakers, increase your implied possession. So I definitely think Corey Joseph could be somebody that we putting into the stocking stuffer or the turkey stuffer, who will be seasonal here as a potential value play at the guard spot. Past that, there's not a whole lot of warm and fuzzies here. You could also turn that same line of thinking into like a Frank Jackson, guys like that. But I think Corey Joseph might be the guy that I grit my teeth and put in there unless we get news to open up somebody else later on in the night.
All right. Yeah. Interesting play on our board. And it might just be because I caught it between updates, but pretty massive boom score probability on Joseph for 3,200 on the DK slate, 23.9 projection. He's sitting at a 47.3% boom score probability on that. A little bit more tempered on FanDuel because he's at 3,800 against the higher cap, 33.2% boom score for 24 FanDuel points on the median, but only coming in like 9-10% in the optimal and coming up at slightly negative leverage. So I think he's a really interesting play and a guy that could potentially be a minor inflection point on this slate when we think in terms of the value plays, because that's a pretty broad extreme if he's only going to be in the optimal 10% of the time, but we're seeing that 30% trajectory toward him getting through a ceiling. So it feels like degrees of ceiling there for him might make all the difference. So I think that's a really interesting play and definitely a guy to mix in. At the pay up level, it looks like a couple of the Bulls are shining through toward the top with Zach LaVine and DeMar DeRozan, both drawing some significant optimal lineup rate. On FanDuel, they're both shooting guard eligible, with LaVine coming in shooting guard point guard, DeRozan coming in shooting guard small forward. On DK, you don't have that problem. You get LaVine shooting guard small forward. You get DeRozan at power forward. Interesting mix of positions. But how are you seeing LaVine and DeRozan breaking down? Do you want one of those guys more than the other one? Or are you taking lineups with both of them?
Yeah, it almost doesn't make sense how they coexist so well. Both averaging about 26 plus real points a game. So you can almost put them together game to game. You kind of teeter totter to not have 100% overlap. But at first I was cautious to have both, thinking they would cannibalize each other. But as the seasons progressed, I've learned that you can get away with them both, especially on a shorter slate like this one. So I will have them both, but obviously wouldn't be 100% overlap. But no, I've outgrown the fear of LaVine or DeRozan. I've kind of let them fly together. Right now, they both have almost identical projections in my model, so I'll let them fly and let them hang where they drop in the cruncher opto later.
Yeah, I'm with you. And that's to your point, that's a lineup that I was really kind of expecting some pieces of that rotation to kind of cannibalize one another. And yeah, there's some harmony going on there that I was not expecting. Another guy that's kind of popping to the top of the board also in that rotation, 34.2 minute projection on Alex Caruso for only 5,500 on FanDuel, 5,100 on DK. Also kind of coming up fairly optimal, decent medium projection. Is he a guy who's in the mix? I know he's slightly negatively leveraged, but is he a guy from like the mid-range kind of value plays who's in the mix for you as well?
Yeah, I like to split my player pool to tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. He's a tier 3 guy for me, 5K. Going to need 30 to feel like you're getting a good deal. I think it's a possible range outcome, but it's not something that's blowing me away. So him and Lonzo kind of in that 3 spot where I'll probably put LaVine and DeRozan a little more into like that tier 2 level.
Makes sense. Anybody that's really standing out for you that we haven't touched on, be it a pay up kind of a guy or somebody from the mid range or somebody from the value that you're really excited about? We can cherry pick a couple more options to talk about as we go through. But anybody who's really standing out for you that I haven't landed on?
As far as like guard is concerned,
in the guard spot,
yeah. I think if we expect Anunoby to be out here, Fred VanVleet, if that game stays quasi competitive, he's going to have to play a lot of minutes. So I'd look towards Fred VanVleet at, around 8K on both sides to hopefully produce almost a point per minute if they keep that game scrappy long enough, strong enough for him to get to the 40 plus. So he's somebody just based on minutes that I probably wouldn't want to be without, especially considering Anunoby's down. And Anunoby is surprisingly represented 20 real points a game. So somebody's got to compensate for that.
Yeah, definitely going to be some additional looks in the offense there. And if we look at VanVleet, the usage is down a little bit, 22.5% across all situations this season. It was 23.7% guy last year, 1.08 FanDuel points per minute last year, down to 1.03. And you could see maybe some potential, a few extra shots start falling for Freddie VanVleet. We know that we can expect some minutes. He's averaging 38.1. And like you said, there's going to be a hole in that rotation. So easy track for him on a point per minute and trajectory toward like a 40-minute kind of a night. So definitely, especially for 7,900 across both guard spots on DK, I see some big upside there and definitely worth getting to. Would it be a little bit more tempered for you with only point guard eligibility and 8,400 on FanDuel with a handful of guys, looks like 4 or 5 guys at the point guard spot ranked ahead of them on the FanDuel slate in terms of our optimal lineup rate?
Yeah, definitely. Like we can't overstate how good this Warriors defense has been, full strength at home. So it's not a warm and fuzzy play. It's just a minutes equal money play in mass centered for me.
Makes sense. Yeah, makes sense. So that brings us up to the quarter poll here on this one. And let's see what this read says, because I haven't ever read it before. So we're going to find out about this one all together now. We've got a special going on for Black Friday, which you need to take advantage of. Our NFL Weekly Pass is the best way to introduce yourself to NFL DFS. And we're giving all new users the opportunity to access it for only $1 for the first week with the promo code STUFFING. Think in terms of Thanksgiving, not any other places that your dirty minds might be going. This package includes player rankings, ownership rankings, and everything we have to offer for NFL Showdown and single game contests, which if we know Thanksgiving, there's going to be some interesting single game contests that day, some interesting Showdown contests. Also included with that, access to our premium tools and data for in-season fantasy football and tiers contests on DraftKings. Promo code STUFFING. Access our most expansive NFL Express Pass ever for only $1 for your first week. You can activate that coupon by clicking the link in the description of this video down there somewhere. And this offer is valid through Friday, November 26th. I'm pretty sure that's this coming Friday, Black Friday after Thanksgiving. Stop guessing, start winning. Join Awesemo Plus today. And we'll talk about our great sponsors, Yahoo, at the next break. But Gunn kind of brings us somewhat smoothly, a little bit bumpy, maybe a little turbulence, who knows. But brings us into the power forward spot, the small forward spot, forwards in general, I guess. And looking across both sites, there's some interesting plays and there's some differentiated plays. Like we mentioned, DeRozan, who comes in at radically different positions site to site. There's a few other guys who take or leave power forward eligibility along with their center eligibility on some sites. So it's a little different look. Who are the standout forwards for you, just kind of up and down the board? Who do you want to focus on from the top? Who are you getting to the most of?
Yeah, we mentioned and Spot Levine and DeRozan can be forward eligible as well, so I'll probably target them. And then Sadiq Bey and Jeremy Grant. I really like picking on the Lakers defense, picking on the Lakers pace. You put all these games on the table together, and this game's going to give us an opportunity at a decent pace because the Lakers have been running such a high pace so far this season that you might get a couple extra implied possessions. And then in the absence of Killian Hayes, and we're continuing to be in with life without Kelly Olynyk, I think Grant, Bey, and Cunningham are three easy guys to point at and say, hey, if this game stays competitive, I think these are three guys that will carry the biggest load for the Pistons. So definitely in on Grant and Sadiq Bey in this spot. As far as other forwards that kind of stand out here, I'm looking through this list. There's a different approach going position by position. Gary Trent's a guy that can still get a lot of big minutes. So the same Van Vliet argument where you think minutes equal money, Trent's going to get plenty of minutes and another opportunity without Anunoby. And then in the middle of the list, it gets really, really kind of murky. So I'm really stuck on the top end here. I'd probably say I don't know if you've kind of like fallen out of love with Julius Randle, but the Bulls are somewhat undersized and they also give up a lot of rebounds, right? One of the more porous rebounding teams because of their lack of size, Vucevic being down. With Mitchell Robinson being down, Taj Gibson being questionable, maybe we get some bigger minutes out of Randall in the front court, maybe increase potential rebound opportunities. He's already averaging 10 rebounds a game. So maybe he's somebody we put in that forward spot as somewhat contrarian on DK at 9,700, but 8,400 on FanDuel. You get that 40 plus and a couple extra stocks because of the size advantage. I could sell myself on some Randall here.
I tell you what, I'm glad you called him out. I wrote him up this afternoon in my article, and especially on the FanDuel slate for that $8,400 price tag, flexibility across the power forward and center spot. That was a play that definitely stood out to me. Coming up 29.5% of the optimals. That was placing in the top 5, top 6 or 7 at this point, it looks like in the last update. Getting owned fairly efficiently, but I think it's one of those ones based on the price, based on the positional flexibility, and some of the other values on the board that we can just kind of clearly build to. So I actually like the Randall play there. And to your kind of question that you posed there, I haven't given up as a Knicks fan. I'm still there. I mean, we kind of have to be, right? We invested in him. I don't think he's the number one player on a championship team, right? I think we can all agree on that. He's going to be best to be served as the second banana on a championship team. But a guy for DFS who's going to come in at that 8,400, giving me 1.15 fantasy points per minute this season, 1.21 last year on slightly more usage. And if you tell me he's only at a 51.3% true shooting percentage, I feel like there's more to give there. His assists are still right there. He had a major uptick in assists last year. He's still at a 25.2% assist percentage. So, yeah, I like the Randall play, and I would pay $9,700 to get a little different with him on DK. He's a different kind of play over there, I think, right? A little bit of more of a last man in kind of a play that you build toward, where I think he's actually got a little value and utility on the FanDuel slate. But, yeah, glad you called him out because I definitely think that's a spot that I would want to get to. Bay's another guy that I wrote up during the afternoon. I like that value. I like the upside. Basically book 30 points at the 5,700, and then anything you get beyond that is kind of gravy there. Anybody that's standing out to you from the value perspective, be it like it looks like if we're sorting by DK, maybe Jay Crowder stands out a little bit at 4,200 on the power forwards. If we're going down the board a little bit, THT from the Lakers on the other side of that Lakers Detroit game, getting a little bit of love. Maybe Isaiah Stewart, who is one of the Pistons that we haven't mentioned yet, getting a little bit of love at the power forward spot. So any of those guys standing out for you, or anybody else that you're really interested in?
Yeah, it's kind of just the spray and pray area of the player pool for me. Even Evan Fournier feels like, hey, at 4K, he gets hot. We saw in that last game, still took double-digit shot attempts. So if he's going to hit 50-60% of them on a good game, maybe Evan Fournier at 4K can fill a need for a lineup in a 4-game slate, right? We can maybe weigh those raw points a little bit more than usual. But yeah, no, I think it's pretty ugly down there. You just kind of spin the wheel, make a deal.
Yeah, for sure. And actually, Fournier is a really interesting call. Just looking at the board, 4,000, that slots him into the 11th spot at any position on the DK board if we're sorting by optimal lineup rate. And one of the few guys who's positively leveraged and up near the top of the positive leverage board. So that makes him a really interesting, really uncomfortable kind of a play. 0.77 fantasy points per minute, down from 0.96 a minute last year. That's a major, major difference. But a guy that we have seen do it over the course of time, and a guy that I still, again, have to kind of believe in because he's on my team here. So, yeah, I think for value, that makes a ton of sense there. Any love for, we've talked about some of the Raptors and some of the effect that OG being out will have. He's a little bit of a pay-up option, but a guy who's kind of stood out from that like middle range of the upper tier, Pascal Siakam. Any love for him? A projection of 34 minutes from Alex tonight, averaging 31.7 in his return. Any love for Siakam? Does he get elevated with OG coming off at all for you?
Yeah, like I said, minutes sometimes just equal money in NBA DFS. So if he's going to get the opportunity, I'll play him with full respect to the Warriors defense. And he's the guy that probably crosses up with Draymond the most. Wouldn't be high levels of confidence or warm and fuzzies, but it'd definitely be in the player pool, especially like if I'm going to get to some lineups that feature a couple Warriors, not just Steph. Might try and go NFL a little bit, run it back with a couple guys on a 4-game slate to game scripted to be competitive. And yeah, Siakam would be one of the guys that I expect to have to pick up some slack here. So not a high level of confidence, but the minutes are just too much to look away from, and for me not to get a little bit of exposure to.
Yeah, it makes some sense there. And is that something that you're typically looking to do on shorter slates where, we talk about it with a lot of football, with showdown slates in particular, where we're, looking to maybe, if you build a lineup, tell a story with that lineup, make each play make sense with the last play. Is that something that you get into maybe a little bit more on a short NBA slate? 4 games, there are some plays to work around where you can just kind of let the math do its thing. But I think maybe, is there a little bit of an advantage to doing that and maybe thinking through some of these plays and how they work within one another? If you're building for a short slate, is that something you focus on?
Yeah, it's still, slate contingent, but like this will be a slate where I could see myself game stacking one or two of these, and and on a short slate, if you just get that double overtime game, it helps out. But it just makes sense that a game can shoot out, and several pieces from that game will get there. And I think that's really where the Pistons rise to the top for me. Obviously, the prices have to make sense for this to happen. And for me, the Pistons seem like the best price team. But points per minute and salary per minute, the Raptors make an interesting case. It just happens to be like the worst matchup you could ask for on the road. But we just give a little bit of credence to the minutes. But yeah, I definitely do that. But it's not a rule of thumb. It's just a slate specific, and I think the slate offers that.
Yeah, it seems to lean into that just with some of the different absences creating opportunity, like you're talking about with just having minutes on the board. At a certain point, it's just the ball's going to go in the hoop or the ball's going to bounce off the hoop and somebody's going to catch it and rebound it. So there's just points to be had, and guys being on the court increases their opportunity. So yeah, there are plays like that. There are standout plays. I think that it makes a lot of sense, particularly with the way that this slate is slanted. There are 4 guys priced above 10,000 on the FanDuel slate. There's I think 5 above that mark on the DK slate. And then everything drops really quickly into the mid-range and a lot of positional flexibility up and down the board. So there's just a lot of different ways to attack this in terms of unique lineup construction. So it's a slate where I'm a little bit maybe less concerned about, even for a short slate, the uniqueness of my lineups, because I think we can put things together in interesting different combinations where we're just getting to things in ways that people aren't necessarily looking at it. And I think with a few of the standout plays that we've got on our board here with positive leverage on them, we gain in doing that, so that we get a little bit ahead of even the general public in doing that. So thinking about it from just kind of a leverage perspective, I'm just looking at some of the more highly leveraged plays, and we hit on Evan Fournier. We hit on some of the Raptors here. A guy who's coming up with positive leverage early on who might catch up just based on name brand recognition. LeBron James, 34.2 minute projection, 10,000 on the FanDuel slate, 10-4 on the DK slate, small forward, power forward eligible across both. I believe we're getting them tonight. I haven't seen any news to the contrary. Is that a play for you?
Yeah, I was actually just looking at Westbrook, but kind of the same line of thinking. It's easy to dismiss all the Lakers. Like, all the Lakers are back. I can't pay 10 plus K for any one of them specifically, but it's still the Pistons and it's still a 4-game slate. So if you can get to 50 fantasy points from AD, LeBron, or Westbrook, even if it's just one. I do think you could take advantage of maybe the field being a little bit, I don't want to say lazy, but a little bit simple when it comes to approaching the Lakers. So yeah, I could get to some LBJ. I was just curious thinking about, like, would I set a rule to only have one of the Lakers' big three, just because I do think that there's a common range of outcomes for one of those guys to get me 50 plus. And I think on a 4-game slate, 50 plus, that dog will hunt. So yeah, I can get to some LeBron James.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially on a slate where we're expecting to book like a lot of these mid-range kind of prices into our lineup, maybe we're only getting to 1 star. I think that makes some sense to maybe set up that rule where you're only getting one of these pay up options from the Lakers. Would LeBron be your favorite out of those 3 guys if you had, gun to your head to pick one of them?
I think it's Westbrook for me.
Westbrook.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I'm a kind of a Westbrook homer, so maybe it's biased. I don't know.
Hey, look, we're talking about a guy who has multiple times averaged a triple double for the season in a sport where something like that matters, or a contest at least where something like that matters for NBA DFS. So I don't ever fault anybody for going to Russ Westbrook, and you're getting him at 9.5 on FanDuel, 10.2 on DK. I can't blame you for that. In terms of the site's numbers, he's coming up a little bit, less optimal, but it's one of those spots where you're just looking to book some raw points. So it's not a guy that we're building toward those optimal lineup rates. I don't think it's not a guy where we're really looking for a lot of those probability marks. It's a guy where we're looking at the fact that less than 10% of the field is going to be on one of the best players on this board. We can all agree, I think, that Russ is one of the best, let's say top 10, top 5 overall, just talent-wise producers on this board. So getting to him at under 10% ownership has value in and of itself to me. So if we're just building that last man in kind of a stance, I actually really like that call, regardless of what some of the optimal rates say there. Looking around the board on some of these other games, on the other side of the Toronto game that we've talked about so much, we've got a guy like Draymond Green coming in decent kind of mid-board optimal lineup rates, but really negatively leveraged across both sites because he's at a pretty fair price for Draymond Green, 6,900 on FanDuel, 66 on DK. Is he somebody you're eyeballing at either the power forward or the center spot on either site?
Yeah, I think 6,600 is a nice little landing spot on DraftKings. My numbers are spitting back 30 plus fantasy points. I won't turn down 30 plus fantasy points. Like I said, I'm a little bit more floor respective on the short slates. Just take me some raw points. On the big slates, I really aim for ceiling, nothing else. But I think on this slate, I'm fine with getting some Draymond here for 30 plus minutes. A guy who's going to stuff the stat sheet against any team.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, 59.9% true shooting percentage, 33% assist percentage, and a 12.4% rebounding so far in the season. Pretty dynamite numbers from Draymond, 1.07 fantasy points per minute, only sees 13.6% usage and still puts up over a fantasy point per minute in his 30 minutes a game. That's pretty stellar for that kind of a price tag. And you're right. I mean, it's just a 4-game slate where there's not a ton of major upside. There's not a lot of real bright shining stars. Some of them who are the name brand kind of guys like LeBron do have a little bit of a ding, like just coming back from injury and it being, maybe a little banged up, a little questionable. So there's not a ton of great spots to spend money. Nikola Jokic, same kind of a thing, super expensive guy coming in with a little bit of a banged up wrist. So I think it's all about getting some of these mid-range plays right, and getting a guy like Draymond Green right could make all the difference, whether it's as a foundational play or as just kind of a guy who sits in your lineup regardless of the negative leverage. You just book those points and move on from there. Anybody else to you standing out from the forward position, either forward spot that we haven't really covered?
No, I think we've pretty much touched on everything that I'll have exposure to. Like 7,200 for Will Barton just feels like that's going to be a little uncomfortable for me. But if we got hit with the curveball later on Jokic, I guess Barton and Aaron Gordon would be interesting guys to just maybe have a plan of action for. But if Jokic is in, I'm not especially interested in either one of these guys at their price points against the Suns. But they would be somebody I'd have to revisit if Jokic didn't land in this slate.
Yeah, and that'll be a major inflection point for the slate if he ends up not going. Gordon's a guy who interests me in that scenario. Guy I made money with on one of our sponsor sites the other day, grabbed a bunch of shares of him when Jokic was scratched for pretty cheap, and he paid out a pretty nice price tag. So we'll talk about that site some other time. But tonight we're brought to you by Yahoo, one of our favorite places to play. We've been partnered with them for a long time. We brought you some great killer promos with those guys. So for Fantasy NBA this season, we're bringing you some great offers. We've got an exclusive limited time offer, which gets you 1 free month of Awesemo Platinum. To qualify, you need to be new to Yahoo, right? New Yahoo subscriber. That's an important detail. We want you to be a new Awesemo subscriber as well. You got to sign up for the link for the account with the link that's down there somewhere. You make a first-time deposit, real money. You play in a first-time contest, real money. If I sound like I'm being really specific about these things, it's because we get a lot of people writing in saying, hey, I've been using Yahoo since 2014 and I made a deposit. Can I have my free account? Well, no, that wasn't a new Yahoo account. So there are some rules to follow, but it's a great promo for anybody who's new. And if you're not, maybe we'll squeeze you in. Send us an email anyway. What the hell? I'm being nice. So Yahoo's going to send you our name, send us your name. They're not going to send you our name. That would be weird. They're going to send us your name after you enter and after you hit all those different points on their promo. We're going to reach out to you. We're going to get you the coupon code to get your account set up. Again, it's not an automated process. So that's another thing people tend to be a little confused about. You got to communicate with us. You've got to set up your account. We're going to get your promo code set up. If you need immediate access, email us at support@awesemo.com. My customer service team will get you taken care of. You can also claim a free $10 below, which can be used to enter any Yahoo contest. But if you use that $10, doesn't qualify for the promo. You got to use a paid entry. It's got to be real money for the entry. So you can use those things separately, but if you go through our promo code, you get a free $10 at Yahoo. Make sure to use our DFS tools and projections designed specifically for Yahoo to give yourself the best shot at winning big. Make sure to check out Yahoo DFS, guys. It's a pretty fun site. There's not a lot of sharks playing on it either. You got a lot of people who have their casual season-long action over there and then just click in, throw in 2 or 3 DFS entries. A lot of overlay, a lot of soft entries. It's a good place to play. Gun, let's talk about some of these centers. Then maybe we'll take some questions. We got a little time before we get to lock. We'll check for some breaking news while we do that. But who's standing out to you from the center position? We talked about one of the biggies off the top. If you want to circle back through him, that's cool. If you want to go in a different direction, that's cool too.
So the Lakers did just drop their lineup, and they're going big again. They put THT back on the bench, starting DeAndre at the center spot, which is going to push out AD. And I do kind of like AD from a fantasy perspective in that split a little bit more, a couple more maybe shots looking his way. And then, Taylor Horton Tucker, his scoring potential versus Avery Bradley and DeAndre Jordan. So it seems like there could be even more some more shots for AD. So AD at 10.6K is probably somebody I'm going to like a little bit more now than maybe I did 15 minutes ago. So I'll start with him. We talked about Randall earlier, undersized matchup. The Bulls offer against him. So I'll get to that. Jokic, if he's in, I want to be bullish on Jokic. I think his points per minute production, his usage, everything just lines up for him to be an incredible play, even in tougher perceived matchups he's gotten there for me. So I hate that. I hate that this Lakers game isn't the West Coast game. I can't manipulate some swaps here, but obviously if Jokic was in, I would want him. We did also see that Isaiah Stewart is playing. If he can stay out of foul trouble at 4,600, he's shown a propensity to be point per minute. Looks like they'll probably need to sell out for size here. So 4,600, I don't mind some shares of him. And then DeAndre Ayton, I believe we saw Frank Kaminsky is going to be out. So it seems like it's going to be him and a little bit of JaVale McGee. So running back at Jokic. Could we get to 40 plus? They finally corrected his price point. Did they overcorrect it? Maybe a tad, but again, on a 4-game slate, if you're going to get me, opportunity at 12 to 17 rebounds and low end double, I'll probably take it on a 4-game slate. So those are the names that kind of really stick out. I don't really have a ton in the low end other than like Isaiah Stewart. And I guess with Mitchell Robinson out, Nerlens Noel gives you a chip in a chair. He did play 29 minutes against Houston. Didn't do a whole lot with it, but sometimes minutes equal money. And we talked about Chicago being so undersized that maybe he just gets there by default.
Yeah, and that's the kind of play that, maybe is a difference maker on this slate, right? A guy that not a lot of people think about, a guy who's not a major upside producer in terms of scoring, in terms of, assists, a little bit with rebounds, but maybe you get that game where he grabs, 5 or 6 stocks and you get there with 10 points, 5 or 6 stocks and a handful of rebounds. And for 4,500 on FanDuel, 3,700 on DK, that just vaults you up based on what you can buy at other positions with that other people aren't getting to. So yeah, those are the kinds of plays that we're, that we tend to look for. Isaiah Stewart falls kind of into that bucket too. 4,600, 900 more on the DK slate and another 500 more on the FanDuel slate. It's a little bit closer, I guess, in terms of those two heads up on FanDuel where they're only separated by 500. Different positionally, but I feel like if you're going to one, maybe you don't go to the other because they kind of are going to book the same value there. Do you have a preference? For me, Stewart coming in negative 13.3 leverage on the FanDuel slate, significantly less negatively leverage at -5 on the DK slate, but still a little bit negative. Do you have a preference between those two guys in terms of like a value play that you want to get as a big man there? Both slated for around the same kind of minutes.
That's Stewart versus Noel.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I lean Stewart just because of, I don't know. People just don't. I don't want to say don't, but the Lakers have been breeding so much upside in fantasy to opposing bigs or opposing everything. And then for them to go the Twin Towers approach today makes me feel like there's a little bit more validity in him and Isaiah Stewart having to be out there and they have to respond big. Whereas the Knicks could put Randall at center against the Bulls, right? So I feel like my confidence is higher in them needing Stewart. I just need him to stay out of foul trouble. And sometimes that's easier said than done.
Yeah. And with the pieces that the Knicks have, it absolutely makes sense. And the healthy pieces that the Knicks have too, for this game specifically, I think it absolutely makes sense that you maybe follow that line of thought that they're not necessarily going to match up big and they don't need to in this spot. So yeah, I agree. Isaiah Stewart is probably the guy we're looking at, even with some negative leverage there. I think it's one where we don't necessarily sweat it that much. And where he comes up in some of the optimals, we're getting him around the field. Anybody in terms of, I know you said, not a lot of value guys coming up and it looks like primarily a pay up kind of a spot. Anybody from like the lower range coming up in terms of like, does JaVale have any value to you? I know he's not even slated for very many minutes. He's one of the few value type centers and he's way down the board behind the guys that we've talked about. I'm just looking for like, price even. Everybody is pretty much a pay up option. So it looks like for me, I'd just be getting to, if not Nerlens Noel or Isaiah Stewart, just kind of spendy centers. Is that kind of how you're seeing a trend?
Yeah. I mean, like in big field tournaments, if, you think about Kaminsky being out, is there a world where JaVale McGee can pick up 20 minutes and kind of serve a purpose at 39? You can get a lot of points per minute in his run. So I don't think he's a crazy shot, but for me, I'd probably have to get to 100 lineups, maybe 50 plus lineups to kind of throw him in there as a value nugget.
Yeah. Not a play for the 20 maxers, I don't think. I mean, 7.7% optimal on a 4-game slate, not something to sneeze at. And that's only with a 16-minute projection. So yeah, if you get him out to that 20+ minute range, he's a guy who's putting up 1.33 a minute so far this season. You could definitely see it. It's just, for where we've got him projected in terms of minutes, it's a little bit unrealistic right now. So I'd be a little concerned about it. But yeah, I mean, one of the few guys at the position and center only eligible on both sites. One of the few guys there that we're maybe able to get to. In terms of minutes, just looking down at some of the more value plays, there's really not much on the board. So for me, yeah, I guess we're kind of primarily looking at the top options. Out of overall, if you're constructing a lineup on, let's say DK, who are like the 3 first clicks for you as we're going into 20 minutes before lock here? Who are the 3 guys that you're putting in most as like your foundational pieces before you get to spendy stars or anything like that?
It might come to burn me, man, but I'm stacking Pistons so much. I love picking on the Lakers here, and then looking at each game. Golden State home defense, Phoenix could go many ways if Jokic is, doesn't play. And then Chicago and New York, I'm not expecting like a shootout, a high-paced game. I know the Lakers defensively, they're not great. They play a fast pace, and the Pistons, even not that Killian Hayes represents a lot of usage, but it does maybe up my floor on minute projections for a lot of guys. I just find myself with a lot of Pistons. So I could. Like, is Cade Cunningham, Jeremy Grant, Sadiq Bey as the first 3 a crazy start to a lineup?
All 3. Man.
Maybe not all 3, right?
But, man, I'm glad I didn't eat anything yet. That could have gotten ugly. But no, I get where you're coming from. I mean, it makes sense. Are you like me? Are they guys that have kind of been coming up for you throughout the course of the beginning part of the season? Like Sadiq Bey, I see pretty much every day in a lot of lineups every time they play. Have those guys just been coming up a lot for you in terms of just the season in general?
I've absolutely played Sadiq Bey on nights where he was not a great play, but the minutes, the shot volume is going to be there. Same with Jeremy Grant, minutes, the usage. And then like so maybe it's not necessarily those 3 Pistons, but I like I said, we talked about Corey Joseph potentially having some value here. Isaiah Stewart, like I could see a lot of 3-man Pistons lineups in my build tonight, and I don't know how to feel about it, but I do know that the Lakers just keep giving up big games to teams, and if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah, for sure. And we got since we've been talking since the start of the show, we've probably gotten multiple updates, but it looks like as of our most recent updates, Corey Joseph kind of rocketing toward the top of the board on both sites in terms of the optimal lineup rate. Ownership hasn't really caught up with him. So he's sitting on the DraftKings slate, he's sitting at a 41.5% optimal lineup rate and 13.2 leverage. So one of the more positively leveraged plays outside of Nikola Jokic, who we don't necessarily know if he's playing tonight. Seems like a sturdy value play. We're projecting him for 23.7 in the median, $3,200. That's paid for right there if he gives you 23.7, and we're seeing him with a 46% boom score probability. So I mean, that's kind of standing out now as a lock and load kind of a play, I think, for me on the DK slate. Does that maybe change things looking at that adjusted value in terms of 41.5% of the optimals
for Corey Joseph?
Yeah, on DK.
I mean, so it wasn't that long ago. Kojo could just be out there getting some cardio. That doesn't make. I don't love that. I don't want a Kyle Anderson situation. It wouldn't stun me in retrospect, but on this slate, it just seems you put that many minutes in this pace in this matchup, especially a guy like Westbrook, right? He'll turn the ball over, and Corey Joseph, he'll pick some pockets. So I like it. I definitely think that maybe the owner, maybe he might be over owned at the end of the day, but I think the matchup, it just makes too much sense pre-flop for me to miss out.
43 and a half minutes we made it through this NBA show without mentioning Anderson's name, but yeah, it hurt me. I actually ended up ahead yesterday, but man, if he put up anything, it would have been such a better day. But I feel like a lot of people are in that boat with me as well. Taking a look over at chat, looks like we got a super chat from our pal Gabe Meffrin. I'm going to say Meffrin. He's asking Burks or Fournier, last man in at 4,500 on FanDuel. Also, Frank Jackson or Corey Joseph, if you had to pick one. Thanks for the show. Appreciate you. Gabe, we appreciate you too. Thanks for the $5, buddy. Gun, that was Burks or Fournier, last man in, 4,500 on FanDuel. Also, Frank Jackson or Corey Joseph in a vacuum if you had to pick one.
I think I land Fournier Joseph.
I think I totally agree with that. That would definitely be the way that I would play that. Fournier just, I think, a little bit more capable in that specific spot. So, and the guy that, to put it in a bad narrative kind of a sense, just the guy they want to see succeed there, the guy they brought in to succeed. So I think he's just going to get more of the looks in general, at least for now. So that's the way I'd be leaning there. Guys, if you have more questions, you don't have to super chat them, but we appreciate it when you do. Thanks very much for that. like, subscribe. We've got 156 likes. We've got 1,065 people here. Seems like 9x or so haven't hit the like button, but we appreciate you anyway. Even if you're not out there appreciating us, working hard to bring it to you live here as we get into lock. With about 15 minutes to go, let's see if we got anything to plug, anything to talk about. The Awesemo Hall of Fame is something that's always interesting, guys. If you download our Awesemo avatar, I don't know if Jordan's going to show you guys the screenshots or not. We're not going to go through them one by one, but suffice to say, if he does show them, there will be a lot of interesting, cool winners on the screen, and you guys can be one of those winners by signing up with us for our very affordable plans on the site. And then if you win something, if you hit the top 3 of something, anything with more than 5,000 contestants in it, take a screenshot, send it to us on the Awesemo HOF account on Twitter, and that gets you a free month of Awesemo Platinum. Pretty sweet deal. So all you have to do is have our avatar come in the top 3 in a contest with over 5,000 entries. If you're using our projections, our boom bust tool, things like that, it's not that hard to do that. You can cash in a free month on top of whatever money you win. Pretty solid. Congratulations to any of the winners that we may or may not be showing on the screen right now. Gun, if you had to, single out anybody that you're concerned about on this slate, anybody that's going to like burn you, or you're playing maybe a little bit more of them than is comfortable. For me, it would be a guy like Mikal Bridges, who I just never expect very much from, but he's coming up a decent amount of the time for me. 0.75 fantasy points per minute, a 6.3% assist share, a 5% rebounding share for the season. But he's only 5,100 on FanDuel. He's only 4,800 on DK, multi-position eligibility, coming up pretty frequently in our optimal lineups. Makes me uncomfortable as hell to have him in any lineups. Who are guys like that for you? Is he one of those guys for you?
Yeah, I mean, he makes a lot of sense. I think when I start gritting my teeth at what might kill me, it's what's getting ownership that I don't plan on owning. And kind of looking at the list here, Tony Bradley is a name that is carrying 21% ownership on DK, and we glossed over that. And like looking at his game log, we don't feel like we're missing a ton here, but maybe there's a world we have to play a little bit bigger, and he can pay off his price tag. So I don't have plans on playing him, but 1 in 5 lineups might have him. So if he has a big game, that might put me down. And then also looking at Lonzo and Caruso, they're both carrying almost a 1 in 4 ownership. I feel like their skill sets are so similar that I like, we talked about how DeRozan and Levine don't cannibalize each other, but I feel like the skill set of Caruso and Lonzo in a weird way could cannibalize each other, because they're likely going to need the defensive peripherals, the steals and whatnot to really peak at their price points today. So I was thinking about, maybe not having 2 of them in the same lineup, but seeing the field getting to them at almost a 1 in 4 rate, that might hurt me later, because I don't think I'm going to have that much of them.
Yeah, and it looks like if we're going by the Boston's tools, Caruso coming out a little bit more frequently optimal, a little less negatively leveraged. So for me, less salary, maybe not the name brand that Lonzo is for the public at large. So maybe Caruso is a little bit more, it's weird to say for a guy who's 36% on one side and 26 on the other, but maybe a little bit more sneaky than what Lonzo comes in as on this slate. So I think out of the 2 of those guys, that would be my preference there. And yeah, Tony Bradley, that surprised me. I hadn't taken note of him at all, but coming up pretty negatively leveraged, only 8% optimal on the FanDuel slate, 15-ish% optimal on the DK slate, but against 23% ownership. That's a little concerning for me. I don't know how frequently I'd be there. We've only got him projected for 21.1 minutes and 0.82 fantasy points per minute. That's a tough ask, especially against New York. I mean, a little bit more pace up this season, but still a relatively good defense, and the opportunity for both of those teams to just play it small, like we talked about. So I don't love that spot by the field. I agree with you there. Anybody who's standing out as a spot where you're saying, I'm going to be well ahead of the field, and I love this. Like, this is where I'm going to win this slate, my advantage on this player. And if so, or players, and if so, who are they?
On FanDuel, I'm really hoping it's Russell Westbrook, but on DK, I'm really starting to think my way into a little bit more Anthony Davis now with THT going to the bench. You could really 3 live crew AD, LeBron, and Westbrook as the offensive guys, easily dismissing Avery Bradley and DeAndre Jordan. Obviously, that's not a large percentage of the minutes here, but I do think 20-plus shot attempts for AD is very, very likely here. He did get 31 real points against Boston, deep minutes. it's in my head, right? But I played him the stomach game. I played him the tie my shoe ejection game. So that stings. But I think I'm talking myself into a decent chunk of AD here, and it seems like I don't have to put up a lot of equity to be over the field right now.
And I tell you what, that's kind of something that's like, it's like baked into that AD play at this point. Like, I think the field kind of thinks that way too. So I feel like he always takes that ding of just like, he's fragile. He's, you know, he's an eggshell, right? He's going to be out on the court and something's going to crack and he's going to have to go into the locker room. So I feel like people do still worry about that. And he takes a minor ding for it. So yeah, as a grit your teeth and bear it kind of a play for a superstar guy at a high price, I think it makes some sense. Guy who I'm hoping one day turns into a superstar. I'll take star. I'll probably take second tier talent from him. But I like how he's come on over the last year plus. And I think the price is right on him. Not getting a ton of love from our tools, but kind of falling into the mid-range on a short slate at negative leverage. RJ Barrett for 5,500, small forward and shooting guard on FanDuel, 5,500 point guard, small forward on DK. More interesting positioning over there. Do you like RJ Barrett at all, or is he just kind of a mix and match kind of a play for you?
Man, those guard wings for the Knicks are such a roulette wheel for me. Between the starters and when they don't do well, the bullpen comes in and pitches them back in it. So
plays the entire second half.
Yeah, I tend to just wash my hands with him. So it makes a lot of sense though. If we go back to Barrett being who we think a Thibodeau starter should play deep minutes 30 plus. But yeah, those Knicks guards really are hard to predict.
And it's just tough. We've got him projected tonight under 30 minutes. And you see it, bounce around based on how these guys are playing. And so far for the season, 49.3% true shooting, 11.3% assists, 7.7% rebounding. The points per minute are down to 0.79. He was a 0.86 guy last season on almost exactly the same usage. It's just a little bit, hopefully, of some working out the kinks early in the season. What are we, 15-ish, 16 Knicks games? 16 Knicks games into the season so far. So hopefully a little rust and just working those things out. But it's a questionable play. But in terms of fantasy value, I would get there some, but I would get there a lot more if he was positively leveraged here. It looks like the field is just going to be there. Looking around for some of the value, anybody standing out for just leverage in terms of like a dart throw guy, not necessarily one of your go-to plays, but somebody who's maybe a little bit interesting because he's carrying a little bit of leverage and maybe he's got that dart throw upside?
Towards the bottom here. No one's really standing out. We talked about McGee earlier. He does have slate breaking potential if he just goes bananas in 22 minutes, but no one at the bottom there for me. Just scrolling up a little bit more, I think I keep landing back to AD. We got him at 15% owned, and I degened into some extra lineups here, and I'm wondering if maybe I should be more responsible with that 15% because I got a lot more than 15% right now.
Look, we're booking a superstar into some spots. We've got his teammate LeBron just coming back from injury. You never know, I might not see as many minutes on the court with him. I don't dislike it. I think it's interesting. Is Jeff Green a value play if Jokic doesn't play? He's coming in 30-minute projection right now for only 4,400, 3,700 on DK. If he bumps up to like a 34, 35-minute projection, does he become a value play for you?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to skin in your teeth, 20, 24 point range of outcome, I don't think that's like a crazy click here. Like I said, on this slate, I'm a little bit more receptive of just grabbing some raw points, but it comes with volatility, kind of like the Tony Bradley of the forward position where it makes sense, but, not going to feel overly great about it.
Yeah. I think I'd rather book it for 3,700 against the DK cap than 44. I know it's all relative to the different size caps, but I still think I prefer it a little bit more on the DK slate if I was going to go there. And we would see the optimal to boom climb a little bit if that was the situation. But definitely, kind of a winding down toward the end of the show kind of a guy to talk about here rather than a guy we're leading with, certainly. Guy who didn't really come up during the show, star caliber kind of a player. And seems like a fair price, 8,600 on DK, 81 on FanDuel. Devin Booker. Does he do anything for you in that Denver Phoenix game?
Yeah, I think it's easy for him and Chris Paul to get lost in the sauce here, and they both have 40, 50 plus fantasy point potential. And that Nuggets backcourt, I'm definitely not running from. So yeah, absolutely, he could be one of those obvious in hindsight plays here that I could certainly fire up. 8,600 on FanDuel, dual guard spot eligible. The shot volume's absolutely going to be there. 20 plus shot attempts in a competitive game, more than likely. So I can get behind that. I wish his peripherals were a little bit more solid, but you see in the games where he's just getting, 4 or 5 peripherals in a couple columns. That's when he's really contributing greatly. So yeah, Devin Booker for sure will be in my mix.
Sense. Looks like we got a couple questions in our premium Discord, which I encourage everybody to make sure they sign up for. We've got a Discord link to verify yourself. It's awesemo.com/Discord. So check that out and get in there if you're a member. Members only, though. We'll set up a public section at some point in the future. Josh Nork in there asks, the boom bust is showing Poole as a decent play tonight. How would you decide between him and Caruso on FanDuel? Let's just open that up in general. How would you decide between Poole and Caruso if you're making that decision?
I mean, I probably expect Jordan Poole to take more shots than Caruso. Maybe not a ton more, but I don't know. I probably lean on. They're not really the same price, right? Like I don't know. I guess if we weigh points per dollar, I'd be leaning on Caruso. Maybe that unlocks someone else. It's not like I'm in love with Jordan Poole here, but if I had to 1v1 them, all things equal, I'd probably lean Jordan Poole just a coin flip essentially. But in terms of points per dollar, I'll probably lean Caruso.
Yeah, and that does come down a little bit differently on the FanDuel slate, but they do come up very similar in terms of the overall optimal rates. We're talking about 28.5 versus 27%. For me, I'd be looking at which one of those guys is less negatively leveraged or to put that better, more positively leveraged. And Caruso comes in at a negative 7.9, and Poole was a lot cleaner than that. I lost track of where he is on this board here. There he is, sitting at a 0.6 on the positive side, 27% optimal, 26.4% leverage. So I would lean toward Poole just based on that ownership. But if you put them both into the wash across 150 lineups, I would want shares of both of those guys with that kind of value, that kind of optimal rate. So I think that's kind of the approach there. If you're only making one lineup and you need that ownership edge, that's where you make that decision. But ideally, you don't have to make it on that point. Bars is asking, do we want Paul and Fournier or Burks and Fred VanVleet on DK single entry GPP? Paul and Fournier or Burks and Freddie VanVleet?
Paul and Fournier is pretty much a snap call, right? Burks is,
I think so.
Yeah.
Burks is essentially an off-the-board player, mixing kind of a play. Freddie compares fine to the other guys, but I think you're talking about 2 real plays versus like 1.5 plays there. So for me, I'd be with you on the Paul and Fournier. Swiss 410, as probably our last question in here, is asking Stewart or Bridges, last man in for FanDuel cash. Stewart or Bridges?
Probably Stewart.
I agree. I wrote up Bridges this afternoon. I think you can get away with either one of those plays. I think you're squeezing a little bit more reliability, a little bit more multi-category productivity out of Stewart that you're not necessarily getting from Bridges. So I think that's the way that I would go with that one. Gun, we're coming toward the end of the show here. Everybody out there, make sure you hit the like and the subscribe. Gun's been working hard. I was, like I said, happy Thanksgiving, everybody. I've had a couple of drinks and I'm having some fun over here. So I came in just totally relying on Gun. So all the thumbs are going to Gun tonight. Every thumb that you hit goes to him. So make sure you hit him and hit him aggressively. Get us up over, I don't know, however many 100 likes we have. We're at 192. Get us up over 200 likes, guys. We got 898 people still hanging out here before lock. If you got any last possible second things to call out for the crowd, anything there, Gun, or anything you want to plug or talk about on the site or in your personal life? How are things with you?
Well, my father. No, I don't have any. What a random what is that? Pumpkin spice.
And that's been NBA Live Before Lock, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it. Stick around. We've got the NFL Showdown show coming up later on. Make sure you tune in for that. Check everything out that we've got going on tomorrow and through the week. We really appreciate everybody hanging out. Hit that thumbs up. We'll see you later.